ReZero is a big story, like a really big one, and sometimes people wonder what the goal of all of this is. With soon to be 40 main story volumes and 6 published side story novels, even more compilation books, ReZero break times, sometimes adding new information, or lore drops in random chibi movies, and who knows, people will get a side story printed on a towel. Oh, there it is. Well, suffice to say, ReZero is big and only keeps getting bigger. Tons of threats, tons of antagonists, so what are we working towards? A lot of people have spent a lot of time speculating on what ReZero's endgame is, and to be frank, I think giving a completely 100% total answer is going to be impossible. Will Pride play a part? Possibly. Is Echidna involved? Probably. Is Pandora the main antagonist? Maybe if you're stuck in the 1700s, but I'm sure she's involved somehow. Is Capella involved? Probably. It's an entire rabbit hole that people have talked about for a long time, and one time Tape even said that Ferris was endgame material. Well, I'm here to provide a theory I have on one of the big goals of ReZero. Spoiler warning, I'm going to be talking about all of ReZero, any side stories I've read, and all the way up to Arc 9 of the main story. If you don't want to be spoiled, now is your chance to dip out. I'm sure there will be multiple objectives in the final arc of ReZero, but I think I have a pretty firm grasp on at least one goal that I haven't really seen the fandom talk about since Arc 4, since all they love to talk about is Pandora's big-ass forehead. And to start, we just have to go back 400 years in universe. The events of 400 years ago is one of the biggest mysteries in the story by far. Completely shrouded in secrecy, and all the characters who were alive back then love not talking about it besides the occasional glimpse here and there. All we really know is that it was the era of witches, and during that time, one witch that would go down in infamy caused what would be known as the Great Calamity. Half of the world was said to be devoured, and the heroes of the world came together to save it. Flugel the Sage, Reed the Sword Saint, and Volcanica the Divine Dragon. The Witch of Envy is seen as the culprit among all of this. However, the truth doesn't seem to be so one-dimensional, especially if you're an anime only. You see, witches aren't born as witches, well, except this one apparently, much the same as how Sin Archbishops aren't born as them either. To become known as what we consider a witch, one must possess a witch factor, which people seemingly come into possession of through unknown means. We know Betelgeuse had his in a little box. When implanted into your body, the witch factor will manifest in authority, but more on that later. The factor also has an unknown component, which is compatibility. To my knowledge, we have no idea what makes or breaks compatibility. We've seen what happens when someone is compatible, which is basically most people in this story that have authorities, and we've seen what happens when you are incompatible, one of the two primary examples being Betelgeuse, and his immediate struggle and clear twist towards villainy over time, and the other notable example is Satella. Somehow, Satella came into contact with the Envy Factor. I assume it was due to her proximity with the witches, and perhaps the way she got the factor is a mystery in its own right, but somehow she got it, and she was completely incompatible with the Envy Factor, causing a split in her personality. No longer was there just Satella, but there was now also the Witch of Envy. If you watch Season 2, you might not know this, but they are two distinct personalities in the same body, and most of the bad actions committed by the person known as Satella can actually be attributed to the Witch of Envy, except the devouring of the world that was Satella. It's unclear how much influence she has over that personality, if any. It's completely unknown if it's just something that comes out of her or what, but those are the facts as we know them. The heroes of yore moved to put an end to the Witch of Envy's rampage, but even their immense power wasn't enough to stop her, which is something we should put a pin in for a moment. Being unable to stop the Witch of Envy, the Sage, the Sword Saint, and the Dragon all opted to instead seal her in the Augria sand dunes, leading to the Pleiades Watchtower being constructed. Now, this begs the question. How could 3 of possibly the strongest people in the history of the world not kill the Witch of Envy? We don't have any idea what Flugel is or was capable of. Reed was unbelievably powerful and hunted dragons for sport, and Volcanica was, well, a dragon, which they're one of the strongest beings in the world. That might combined, however, was still not enough. Well, I think you all might already know what I'm getting at here. Satella most likely manifested an authority that was an insanely cranked return by death. It's probably different in some ways, as everyone manifests an authority differently, we just don't know how, and I guess that's where this video will go. Considering they couldn't kill her, it means they either deduce that Satella has a return-by-death-like ability, something we've seen many characters do when it comes to Alan Subaru, or perhaps hers functions differently in some way. Ultimately, what matters is that Satella cannot die, and as these authorities are at least usually pretty related to each other and their sins, that also informs our assumptions on Subaru's authority. We technically don't know what it is, but you know, it's probably envy. More importantly, part 1 of this theory hinges on Satella not being able to die. I split it into parts because part 1 is a bit more believable than the others. Part 2 might be a bit out there. For part 1, Satella's lack of death informs the role of Aldebaran and Subaru. What do I mean by that, you might ask? Well, ReZero plays heavily into theatrical motifs. I think things like Al equals Subaru and Amelia equals Satella are all red herrings when in reality they are simply being cast in respective roles. The reasons for these similarities are the same reasons why you might have specific casting calls for a play. This seems to be almost entirely explicit with Stride in Battle Ballad or EX6, as well as Cecilus for, well, most of his screen time. Stride speaks of the observers as having, quote, cast their roles in their miniature garden, end quote, namely by giving people divine protections, but as we later find out, it's probably much more than that. Stride had beef with people with DPs in particular, acting as if they were the main characters in the Observer's plays, but we find out that Observers are a bit more relevant than we think, as they end up casting the role of Stargazers, people they can directly communicate with. And as we slowly learn over the course of the series, these Observers sit in the heavens above, likely being the very stars themselves, and as we all know, stars are often thought of in terms of predestined fate. And if we keep up with the stage play motif, Observers are the ones trying to write the script, casting roles along the way, stringing our cast along, and potentially being involved in handing out divine protections as a method to do so. This is where the term used for Subaru comes in, Sage Candidate. If you watch the anime, this is something cut from Season 2, but at the Witches' Tea Party, some of the witches refer to Subaru as a Sage Candidate. Now, who is to say that there's just one Sage Candidate? Maybe this is an open casting call, and Subaru and Aldebaran were brought in to potentially fulfill this role, and their audition is to kill Satella. Subaru and Aldebaran were brought to this world, turned into apostles of envy, and given return by death-like abilities in turn for that greater purpose. Now, there are some possibly already determined results of this outcome. We know that Aldebaran has a very similar authority to Subaru. We know that Aldebaran seemingly has a traumatic relationship with Satella, and we know that Aldebaran is privy to things that certainly haven't happened yet, even more so than somebody like Subaru in Return by Death. He's a guy who holds a lot of regrets, and with his future quote of, quote, I'm sorry I failed to kill you, end quote, I think we're dealing with a distinct possibility that Aldebaran is one of the people brought to this world to kill Satella. Of course, I think Subaru was also brought into this world to kill Satella. Given Aldebaran's familiarity with Subaru despite Subaru not really knowing much about him, I think Al and Subaru have a relationship very much akin to what Subaru has with people like the Pleiades Battalion because of his power. The shoe is on the other foot for once, however, and for some reason, Aldebaran has developed a very strong dislike for Natsuki Subaru, a reason that we are not at all privy to. Why were they brought to kill her? Well, I'm not sure. It seems Satella herself might have been involved in that decision. Part 2 of my theory is the Great Reset theory, and like I said, this has much less ground to stand on in my opinion. Aldebaran is clearly privy to things about Subaru that Subaru has not done. He knows Natsuki Subaru, quote, through and through, end quote, despite not spending that much time on screen with him. He said a quote along the lines of, quote, can you really stand losing to those stars, Aldebaran-san, end quote, which could be a quote that he is reciting from someone that would call him that, like Subaru. It's also possible it's him disconnecting from his identity as Aldebaran, but I'm really not sure which one. The fundamental divide between Aldebaran and Natsuki Subaru, the two Sage candidates that are auditioning for the role, is that Al wants to follow through on his purpose and kill Satella, while Subaru rejects the premise entirely and wants to save her, a fundamental disagreement on the script. I think this disagreement informs Aldebaran's very strong disdain for Subaru's heroism, or as he dubs it, heroic reveries. It's why he tells Subaru to focus on one person. It's why he tells Subaru to not shoulder the world. It's why he's against the speech in Arc 5, and if the Great Reset theory is true, perhaps Aldebaran has seen failure after failure from Subaru, to the point that he can't stand the idea of heroism. I think this dynamic is a bit substantiated by Al and Cecilus vs. Arakia in Arc 8, because the dynamic is the exact same. Arakia begins to cry as the world is threatened, and rather than finish her off, Cecilus tells Al that he has business with those tears and refuses to kill her, something that seems to agitate Aldebaran, as if it's something that he has plenty of experience with already, and all he could do is watch as Cecilus fails over and over again before requiring his involvement on the stage to put an end to Arakia's torment without killing her. Al and Subaru can't get along because Subaru would extend his hands to anyone he possibly can, and by nature of Al only having one arm, he's fundamentally limited in his capability of doing so, something mentioned almost explicitly in Arc 9 by Ye. Two Sage candidates put on a path to save Satella, one who thinks killing is a form of saving, and another who rejects the premise entirely, all likely propped up by one person who I think also supports the Great Reset theory. Echidna is a particularly interesting character. In Arc 4, she tells Subaru that he got here ahead of schedule, and during the Witches' Tea Party, we learn that Subaru should already be aware of the distinction between the Witch of Envy and Satella, but he's not. This begs the question, why would there be a schedule to begin with, and why should he already be aware of things unless they have already seen these same exact things? And well, my hypothesis comes down to Satella again. While there may be many ReZero goals running congruent, Aldebaran, Subaru, Satella, and probably Echidna may be involved in the biggest. Perhaps ReZero is stuck in a repeated time loop. Not in the sense that people go back in time and Al equals Subaru or Subaru equals Flugel, but this world has been reset quite a few times. Satella doesn't die, the world rewinds, and well, everyone does everything over again according to the script laid out by the observers. Well, what's the point of Al? It's hard to say. It's very clear that Satella does not fuck with Al like that, something I had been theorizing for a while now, until it was seemingly explicitly confirmed in Arc 9. I think Echidna was attempting to groom him into another Natsuki Subaru that would never give up so that the goal may be accomplished. Al could know the contents of other great resets because he knows Echidna, as she says a lot of sussy things, and Arc 3 Aldebaran was very surprised that Rem was Rem and not Ram. Perhaps she was supposed to die in Arc 2 to the curse. Of course, this theory is kind of hard to prove, and perhaps Echidna just used her authority, which seemingly can create things like the Tome of Wisdom, to know what happens in the future, and that's how Al knows. However, Castle of Dreams Echidna clearly existed outside of the loops in Arc 4, and perhaps this could extend to the Great Reset theory, which could inform one of her goals. You could call this Part 3 of the theory, and it's even more of a stretch than Part 1 and 2. Perhaps Echidna is facilitating the death of Satella, not the saving of her, for the same reason she wanted to abuse Subaru's authority and probably abused Aldebaran and his authority. The world can reset, and Echidna can gather more and more information about the world to continually satiate her greed. To this end, she probably groomed Aldebaran until his mind completely broke, and he gave up on being Aldebaran on Gehenhive, all to take advantage of him, to try and kill Satella so that we could retry over and over. The goal of ReZero is to save people, something Subaru does continually, endlessly reaching out his hand no matter the cost to himself, and I think ultimately, Great Reset theory true or not, Subaru's primary goal will be to save the crying girl known as Satella. And perhaps that is what someone like Spyco was set up for. To save someone who may have done bad things in the past, to understand the baggage your name will carry, but to continue to do good in spite of it. You might ask, what is killing Satella to trigger the Great Reset theory? Well, I don't really have an answer for that. I guess that's one of the main holes in the theory, and to be honest, I become less and less confident in the Great Reset theory as time goes, but maybe we'll come back. If we don't, I at least wanted to document the idea in a video because it was at least a fun thought experiment. I believe one of the primary goals of ReZero will be to save Satella. It's possible her death is inducing a repeating world, and perhaps that is part of Echidna's cruel, wicked machinations. That's all. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, make sure you subscribe for more. You can also check the description down below to become a member, which gives you benefits like early videos, membership badges, and cool custom emotes. You can join the Discord where we talk about ReZero, Kagurabachi, Jujutsu Kaisen, and all kind of stuff. Additionally, you can go to the channel store and pick up some awesome stickers made by our channel artist, so you can carry the power of Graphia with you on your water bottle. That's about it though. Thank you for watching. See ya.